How do I? Good afternoon. Welcome to BPWS. Today's guest on the actual show is Ali Moeen Nawazish. Welcome. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me. It's such a pleasure.
You're very welcome. So, Ali, can you tell us a bit about your background? Because you've got a fascinating background, and I think our viewers will be interested to learn exactly how you started out doing what you're doing.
So I had a pretty ordinary upbringing, a pretty ordinary background. I lived in Islamabad, Rawalpindi all my life. And then I had this crazy idea of doing a lot of A-levels. And that kind of like changed my life trajectory in more than one way. I initially started doing computer science at Cambridge, then I moved on to politics, then I entered journalism, and I've been doing journalism for about 10 years now.
Brilliant. So let's go back to the bit that you just skipped over. How many A-levels did you actually accomplish?
So I did 23 A-levels in total, and I had 21 A grades in A-levels and one B and a C. So I kept like, so if I wanted variety, I just did one A.
So I'm sure our audience will be extremely impressed that we've got somebody that's extremely intelligent, that has done 23 A-levels, which is a phenomenal achievement. Now, you said you've been in journalism for 10 years. What made you decide to go into journalism? Because you said you had started off with computer science.
So, very good question. What happened was that I was in Cambridge. I'd done my 23 A-levels. Apparently, it was not a big deal until the end of my first year in Cambridge when someone in the media found out. And then that kind of blew up. And then I got interviewed, interacted with a lot of people, politicians, the social sector, went all over the country in Pakistan and also the UK to some extent, gave lectures and gave a lot of interviews, and that kind of like changed my perception of about the whole world. And I sometimes find it surprising that even after having studied so much, my worldview was still a very little limited worldview. We don't really read about people. We don't really read about how people live in whatever subjects we do read, and the problems that people face. We read about knowledge, which is fine. But I think that exposure that I had made me think about that I wanted to have impact in a different way, and hence I decided that I'm going to do politics and I'm going to do journalism, and that's how that thought process worked.
So, in the sense that you're focusing on the political status, is that just for Pakistan or the world at large?
Well, I mean, I do write about international affairs. Like sometimes there are things happening that you simply cannot ignore, like what's happening in the US right now or other events that are transnational in nature. But generally, of course, I work for a Pakistani media group. I work in Pakistan. I would talk about, analyze issues related to Pakistan for the most part. But I do not ignore international or transnational affairs that are too big to be ignored.
So with the fact that there is the current global pandemic with the coronavirus COVID-19, how has that impacted Pakistan?
Well, I mean, the coronavirus pandemic has, I think, impacted every country in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And we're seeing that we actually overtook China today for the most number of active, for not the most, but we overtook China today, and the number of cases are rising. So we're adding 3,000 to 4,000 cases a day.
Wow. So
that is with limited testing. We don't have widespread testing.
Okay, so with regards...
Sorry, you broke up?
Yeah. With regards to the social distancing, India, Pakistan has obviously a substantial number of very poor people that live in very bad conditioning. How have they been able to actually, adhere to the actual social distancing? Ali?
I mean, that's been one part of the challenge. Uh, yes, I'm here. I'm here.
Oh,
So that has been part of the challenge. I mean, the challenge has not just been adhering to social distancing. The bigger challenge, I think, has been convincing people to follow social distancing. We've seen the world over that still a lot of people, not even just in countries like, not just even South Asia or Pakistan, but even in Western developed countries, taking this pandemic as seriously as it needs to be taken. And we are seeing that, and obviously living in close quarters, poverty, um, having to earn every day, not getting the same level of government support that you're getting in Western countries, where you're just getting a paycheck from the government if you've been furloughed or laid off. That has been a big challenge for people, and a lot of people have been forced to go back to work. And we're seeing the lockdown being eased a lot earlier. Companies allowed to earn, a certain business sector is allowed to work, just to keep the economy going. But I think so we've had that impact. Obviously, like the whole world, we've had mental health impact for a lot of people. People who've gotten sick, who've lost to spend a lot on healthcare, and we've also had the economic impact that the whole world is facing. And I think that's probably one of the biggest. So after health, I think the economy is the biggest thing that's going to suffer, at least in Pakistan, this pandemic.
do you think the Pakistani government has done enough to help people that are in dire situations?
It's, I think in terms of helping people, they've really tried. They have given cash handouts, one of the biggest handouts in history. Now, I can go into details and argue about how effective or ineffective that was, but at least it was done. I think where the government really didn't do as well as I had hoped that it would do was in terms of having a very clear message to convince people, because the government was always balancing the economy versus health and safety, and that was a very delicate balance to strike. And in all my analysis and in all the writings that I've had about COVID-19 and everything else that resulted from it, was that there is going to be no perfect solution, whether to keep people safe, whether to keep the economy running, whether to give handouts or anything. There is going to be no perfect solution. This is an unprecedented crisis. There are always going to be loopholes, people who are left out, and um, other problems that happen. But if the solution works for the vast majority of people, then at least we should try and do it.
That sounds reasonable, but the problem being on an en masse basis, the Western world, to a certain extent, have managed to actually cope better because of the fact that we have a lot more money. But the Eastern countries and the third world countries have been suffering greatly, and we're all heading for a massive recession globally. But third world countries will be impacted even more so, I believe. What's your opinion?
Well, I would agree with you and I would disagree with you. It really depends on a number of things and a number of factors. Let's look at first. Let's look at it economically. Like in Pakistan's example, uh, while there has been a major recession, there are going to be bigger recessions. Some countries are already in recession. We've seen the oil it's actually kind of helped Pakistan in a way, because we are a net importer of oil. We import a lot of oil. That bill has been more than half, so we preserve precious foreign exchange. The local economy hasn't been that affected. We're not that reliant. And then, as a result of the pandemic, a lot of countries have gotten debt relief, which has again been kind of positive. It has helped balance the books. So maybe in some ways economically it's been better, and some ways it has been worse. But in terms of healthcare, money, resources that we give to individuals, yes, that has, I would say, been easier in Western countries that have a lot of money.
How have people coped?
And in terms of
Food, getting medical treatment.
so the government has set up a lot of COVID centers. They're public sector and the private sector. So it's not like the UK where you go to the end. I mean, it's the health system is diversified between private and public. So economically, yes, a lot of people have died. A lot of people jobs, especially a lot of people work what we call daily wages. So they're like they work for the shifts that they show up, like kind of like a zero contract in the UK, where
Okay.
you work for the shift that you're on, and if you're not on a shift, so that has been impact. So that's why I think the intention was to try and open possible. But the other point I was making is in a good way, we've seen that, and now this is not substantiated medical science, this is medical speculation, that death rate is not as high as it has been in more developed countries. Maybe there's better immunity, or people get more diseases, get vaccines which aren't administered in the West so far. So for whatever reason, and I'm just completely medically speculating here, uh, we have seen that the death rate is not as high, and the recovery rate is a lot higher than what we see in Western countries.
Why do you think that is?
So as I said, I'm medically speculating. I think one of the reasons is that you get exposed to more pathogens, viruses, bacteria. Your immune system is maybe more trained, better. Uh, there were a few studies out on vaccines like the BCG vaccine, which isn't administered in Western countries anymore because TB is not an issue there. Is administered here. We also get a lot of area. Um, diseases that you don't have in Western countries. So some doctors think until we have a controlled study or a long-term study which uh, gives more evidence of that, we speculate. It is the strain of the coronavirus. There are more than 30 strains now. Maybe the strain of the coronavirus that has spread in this region is not as deadly.
Well, that's good news, but maybe bad news at the same time. If there's multiple strains, it's going to take a lot longer to find an actual vaccine to actually
Yes,
cope
of course.
with this current situation. If it was just one strain, the vaccine might be able to be developed a lot quicker to help the whole world at the same time. But it looks like we're in for a long problem.
Well, I hope not. I mean, the whole idea, I think, of the vaccine is to find things that are find receptors or whatever is common amongst as many strains as possible, and try to develop a vaccine which works for as many strains as possible. So I have faith in our scientists that they will try and do the best that they can.
Sure, absolutely. I noticed on your Facebook page that you have been commenting about the Pakistani Air India crash, the airline crash. Now, the mass media,
The IA crash.
the plane crash, so they're saying that it was a pilot error. Do you have any views on that?
Sorry, I lost you there for a minute.
Oh, sorry. Okay. The airline crash in Pakistan, the actual media are reporting it as an actual pilot error. Do you have any views on that?
Yeah, I mean, my point is, and I wrote about this, is that it takes months of election, and it takes experts and recreation and simulations to kind of really arrive at what the conclusion is. And I think it's unfortunate that a pilot who's not here with us anymore, who's passed away, even if he was at fault, but he can't defend himself at the moment. So at least I think let all the evidence come through, let the jury decide, and only then we can say, okay, it was pilot error, okay, it wasn't pilot error. I mean, it is just as plausible that the pilot wasn't getting the right readings and making decisions based on the false inputs that he was getting, and that's not necessarily his fault. So I've been more cautious, and I've asked and I've requested as full as possible to let's refrain. And I think it's also a little insulting to the memories of those who passed away to speculate as to why they died. I think it's easier. Let's not put their families in, oh, it was the pilot, and then find, and then if they make their appeal that and they find out, oh, no, it wasn't the pilot, it was something else, and then, oh no, it's now something else.
Yeah, it
These
is.
constellations take their course.
Yeah, and I think it's just people always want answers, so they will jump on any bandwagon just to try and get answers, even though, as you said, all the evidence isn't in yet, and so therefore trying to speculate as to who or what caused the actual crash is a little presumptuous. But people are people, and they do really want to know why their loved ones lost their lives and who's to blame, because when someone loses somebody unexpectedly, you always look to who caused that death. So fully understand we need to be patient and wait for all the evidence to come in. But at the same time, human nature is that, we need to be able to actually point a finger at someone to say, this is the reason why my loved one is no longer here.
Yeah, of course.
There is sympathy for all those people that have lost anybody, not just in the air crash, but also through the actual COVID-19 terrible virus situations globally, because there's been hundreds of thousands of people whose lives have been just literally taken far too soon, and leaving massive gaps in people's lives. So hopefully they will be able to heal in time, but it's going to be a very long process. To that extent, I did set up a website for those that are watching, and I'm sort of hoping you will also look at it. It's called remembered.site, so the extension is SITE, and it's a website for people to be able to actually go to, upload pictures, tributes of anybody that they've lost through COVID-19, to be able to actually start the healing process, to be able to actually share their memories of the loved ones that they have lost. So that's my little pitch.
That is a good idea. I will be visiting it and hopefully never need to use it. But
share it with people.
Yes.
There are hundreds of thousands of people who've not been able to actually mourn their loved one. They've not been able to actually be by their bedside when their loved one was passing away. Not been there to actually have a proper funeral and have all their friends and family to support them.
They don't get the closure that they need.
No, and I just thought that those loved ones are being forgotten, not intentionally, but because there's so many people. How do you actually keep their memory alive? How do you say, well, this person mattered to me? Because the papers and things and media, often highlight maybe doctors that have died because of on the job, nurses, which absolutely we need to actually remember them. But there's the ordinary person in the street, their life mattered too. So hence, hopefully, people will have a way of actually remembering their loved ones.
Yes, and I think it's a socially distant way of remembering loved ones, because we continue to be safe. We need to be safe.
Absolutely. So, but we can also share our memories and our pictures and our stories. Ali, what made you get involved with BPWS?
So it was a message, and they said that you should come over, and I was like, this is an exciting opportunity. It's great to talk to an audience which is different from the one that I regularly talk to, and get new ideas and new inputs and maybe learn a few things.
Absolutely. So obviously the website is focused on the British Pakistani welfare, the Women's Society. I keep saying welfare, but it's women's. So how much interaction do you have with just understanding what's happening to women in Pakistan and any of the challenges that they face?
So I lost the last part. Can you just repeat that? Sorry.
how much interaction do you have with women facing challenges in Pakistan that may have challenges on a financial front, on a home front, on work front?
So I'm fortunate enough to be connected with a lot of people in Pakistan through Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, etc. technology, and I do get very often messages for advice or people who just want to talk, and because I think that also is a big problem that we don't have people to talk to without fear of judgment generally in our lives of the people we know, and we need a trusted stranger sometimes. So I do have I can never claim to have the best understanding or like a very in-depth understanding, but I do feel like that I have some understanding of the issues that women go through.
What resources do they have that's available to them in Pakistan?
So I mean, it depends. It really depends where you are. It depends on your ability to seek out those resources and the help. There are organizations that will help you, for instance, for domestic violence. For now, we've recently had a good domestic violence law. We can argue about how well it's implemented, but we do have one. Um, then other issues of harassment. So we have legal resources, and again, we have now a stronger harassment law. So slowly and surely, I think it's getting there. It will take time, but but these resources might be more accessible to someone who's a educated in the first place, b uh, knows more about their rights, is near a city where the police and where other where the environment is suitable, where they have access to media. May not be the case in far off village in the middle of the desert on the top or near the top of the mountain in the northern regions. So we have that dichotomy of resource availability as to where you are, and I think that is a big challenge. But there are many great organizations working for it. Unfortunately, I think because of this COVID-19 and everything, all that great work has kind of stopped, and we've seen increased instances of domestic violence everywhere in the world. All the reports have pointed to that some people are isolating together, or some people are isolating with their attackers in terms of domestic violence. And we have these unfortunate situations that I think aren't getting as much priority as they should.
So you said that in the far-reaching areas there is not necessarily the same volume of information getting through. Is there any means that the villages that aren't necessarily highly connected, highly educated, can actually access that kind of support system?
I mean, I don't, unless organizations or NGOs or people working in the social sector make the effort to go there to educate, to try and provide help, which is not always welcome. I don't think there are any alternatives. But as I said, social media, the internet, having a smartphone, which is getting increasingly common, broadband penetration with 3G and 4G, which is almost everywhere now, except a few regions. Those I think have been immensely instrumental and helpful. Uh, and that I think is probably the strongest thing available.
So it's the smartphone that's actually going to be able to link people to the actual services that they might need.
Yes, I mean, in terms of that, and then I mean, I remember this case a couple of years ago. One, I mean, if people take notice, you can tweet to the human rights minister. You can, you know, people can support you. They can offer help if you tell your story, and I think that is a powerful tool that people didn't have before, and that becomes very effective. So even if, let's say, the police isn't doing their job, but if it, you know, gets big on social media and then the media picks it up, then obviously you can do things that weren't easily possible before. So I think that we are going through those transformative changes. And another thing is exposure, like getting exposed to knowledge, getting exposed to different ways of life, rule of law, just knowing what is right or wrong, seeing all the awareness campaigns. It maybe it chisels away, it chips away a little bit by little bit, and it leads to something better. But obviously, that's not the only solution. But I think that if anything during this time can be a glimmer of hope, it can be this.
Well, that's really well said, and hopefully, in time, we can eliminate poverty and eliminate, you know, the problems that we face in most of our third world countries, so that one day, inshallah, that everybody will have the same rights and the same abilities that we have here in the Western world.
Well, I mean, I don't expect that to be in our lifetimes, but yeah.
Not, not,
So, but hopefully,
it's a dream.
I mean, that's interesting, right? Because I think every place has its own problems when it comes to the liberty or when it comes to rights, and it's I don't quantify or qualify this as just a third world problem. I mean, look at what's going on in the U.S. right now. You have a whole segment of the US population saying, look, we're being killed by the police. We're seeing Black Lives Matter protests happening in so many countries. So even being Western democracies, we're seeing journalists being arrested in the US. I never thought I'd see that on screen live. The CNN team was arrested by the police. So I think just liberty, freedom, and a way of life that we want and we aspire to is being endangered across the world, not just in one country or another. It's just this whole trend that has risen, and I think great resolve is needed to combat this because we see people that I never expected supporting things which I never thought they would. So that transformation of society should raise alarm bells for a lot of people.
Absolutely. I mean, it is horrifying what's been happening. As you said, it started in the States and is now going through country by country. We've had massive marches in the UK and in London to try and say that Black Lives Matter, and they do. But I believe all lives matter. So it's not just one cultural segment; it's all lives. And unfortunately, throughout the world, I have seen discrimination, not just against colour, but against race, against religion. It's. I always say, where there's a human being, there is an opinion, and that opinion never necessarily is a good opinion. So we end up with challenges because of people's opinions, of them believing that they're right and everybody else that doesn't match their opinion is wrong. And I don't know enough about Pakistan, but do you have the same problems with color, different colors, different castes, different religions?
So I mean, we don't have, I think, a racism problem based on race as such. I mean, some people might argue that there is, but to a very limited extent, but it's not as big. I think the bigger issue might be for religious minorities. They are protected legally. They're protected under the Constitution. There's nothing there, and in practice, I mean, we see some flare-ups, but that has been. But obviously, when that gets media attention, the government. So we don't have a situation where the government's trying to defend it, or the government's trying to say, okay, we're going to send the military on you, or we're going to do this, or we're going to do that. Obviously, there are going to be bad people everywhere who try to instigate violence or sectarianism or try to do things which are not legal or allowed by the law. But what I'm happy about is that whenever such an event happens, and I'm really sad that the event happens, but the silver lining sometimes is that everyone does come together and condemn it and say this should not happen, and the government tries whatever they can to do that. It's not perfect, and obviously I can't speak. I In Pakistan, I speak from a position of privilege. When I travel abroad, I speak from the same position of being discriminated against for for my race, for the way I look, whether that's that extra airport security check, whether that's trouble in getting visas. So, I mean, and I know it's hard to understand what someone else is going through, but uh, I know a lot of people here who would stand up for people who are being discriminated against. And I think that's the general trend we need to go to. And I'm not going to say that there's no discrimination because I don't think, from my position of privilege, I can say that. But yes, events happen, things happen. Uh, I People do support victims. People do support those who are discriminated or persecuted, and I think that that is a positive thing. But obviously, we need to be at a place where it doesn't happen in the first place.
What would you like to see happen in the States?
So my sister lives in the States, and I studied in the States for a year. I did my master's. Um, I think it's the, the primary problem with the States right now is that there is no unifying leadership. Whenever a crisis is unfolding, you need the leadership of the country, the president, to act as a unifier. And we're seeing a situation where the president is acting as a divider, who says, I want to send in military force, who says, I want to, when the looting begins, the shooting begins, someone who's trying to curb free media, trying to press restrictions on social media companies, trying to pressurize them when they call him out for some of the things like what Twitter did. They hit one of his tweets for inciting violence and giving false information. So I'm not sure if it was for inciting violence. I think it was for false information and something related to the protest. But I just don't want to be wrong here. But when we see that, that is a signal to people in either sides of the aisles that okay, I'm with you. Go ahead and discriminate or do whatever you were doing. And to the other end, this is going to keep happening to you. And I think that when you see such a situation, when people see such a situation, they want to be like, okay, we're going to fight for our rights. I mean, two things that humanity has always fought for, uh, even when the odds were against them, even when it logically didn't make sense to fight, was for their rights and for their freedom. These two things are things that, more than food, more than whatever, history tells us that humanity has battled for, fought for ideals, freedoms, and rights. And I think now living the century that we are, we should have been going forward. But somehow over the past 6, 7 years, we've taken a lot of steps back, which I think, because it's my generation, I find quite unfortunate.
So, do you actually think Trump is going to be re-elected in November?
Well, when last time around, I said that he was going to win,
Did you?
and yes, I did. And then all my friends were like, "No, he's not going to win." But for a couple of reasons. One, you have to look at who the other candidate was. A lot of Democrats weren't happy with Hillary Clinton at the time. So, what is different this time? I mean, after the impeachment, my thinking was that he was still going to win. But I think the way he managed the COVID crisis and the way he is managing these protests so close to elections, I think this is going to be very tricky and it's going to get out of his hand very soon. His idea is to keep appealing to his base, but I think what happened last time was that people didn't take Trump seriously. So a lot of people didn't even go and vote. They were like, he never won, so I don't need to bother. And secondly, some Democrats were so unhappy with the way with their candidate that they either voted for Trump or refrained. And at that time, the conservative or the right or the far right narrative was not in the mainstream. Now they kind of are the dominant narrative in terms of in the corridors of power. So whenever you're the non-dominant narrative or you're from the non-dominant side, you are more organized, and they were more organized last time. So we need to see how the other side gets its act together. But given everything, I would be very surprised if Trump was there.
You and me both. I would like to see somebody different coming into power, but at the same time, his opposing council is not that powerful, in my opinion. I don't even know who it is. I mean, usually at this
It's,
time,
it's Biden. It's Joe Biden. He was Obama's vice president. Yes.
yeah, Joe Biden. So Joe Biden would have normally been out there campaigning. You'd have heard some speeches. You'd have understood what he was actually standing for. Absolutely nothing.
But I think that's also a disservice to him right now because of the pandemic. Trump
True.
can come out on TV every day, be visible, and Biden doesn't get to hold his rallies. He doesn't get to engage. He doesn't get to try and convince people to vote for him. So so that is complicated for him. I think it might be more difficult. But Biden has huge support in the African American community, and I think the way things are going, that just might only get boosted for him. So we'll have to see. Some analysts are speculating that the Republicans are going to have a really hard time even holding on to the Senate. But in politics, anything can happen, whether it's 2 days before the election or 4 days. It's just we don't know. But it seems unlikely, hopefully, that um, Trump will not be president again.
You and me both.
Yeah.
I mean, your mouth to God's ears. So I think it would be best if America did get a much better president, because Trump has not done what he should have been doing for his people.
I think not just for his people, he's taken the U.S. Back on the world stage. Like the U.S. has gone from being more outward to inward, and actually given more space to China to come and further. They left the WHO. China stepped up funding for the WHO. They are trying to use their influence less and less around the world. China is doing that more. So I think that under Trump, while the economy had done really great before the coronavirus thing had happened, and that's what everyone was banking on because the economy had done so well, and no president has ever lost with such a great economy. His numbers were amazing, and that's one of the reasons that Trump has wanted to reopen the economy as quickly as possible because that was his strongest point. So I think that has also gone away. And I think it has been a colossal loss for the United States. And even in terms of talent and immigrants that used to go to the US, people now consider other options because they just don't feel comfortable. And I think the US is now becoming more closed and closed and closed.
When you were out there visiting your family and also studying, did you get discriminated against?
So when I was studying there, it was a very interesting. It was under Obama. It was 2014 to 15. It was just a different America at the time. But I was planning to go for my PhD to the States, which I'm postponing now because of COVID. Uh, I know a lot of students are thinking the same, whether they should go study or take a gap year. For me personally, I think it's just not going to be the same experience, either taking online classes or being on campus, but rotating into the classrooms, which most universities are planning. It never happened, but when I went before coronavirus came to look at universities and programs, I was on the plane, and the first time someone asked me, this nice lady sitting next to me from Kansas, and she asked me, "Well, why don't you do your PhD in your own country?" And that's something that I'd never heard uh, before. So I think with what Trump did, that he took what that political correctness at least and did away with that, and racism or discrimination that was more covert became overt under him. And hence the tensions that we're seeing would directly be a byproduct of years and years of overt racism. We saw it with the Muslim ban, in terms of flights in his first year of power. We see it every day with the Mexicans, with this, with that. Dangerous hombres, he says. So that kind of language that would never be used before just became mainstream.
Now, it's very inflammatory, so it's bound to cause upset and angst between people. But you personally, did you ever, apart from that gentleman sitting next to you on the plane, was there anything else that you encountered when you were in the States?
So I think once you get past that initial immigration officer, you're pretty okay. Depends on where you're like. I've been fortunate. Like I go to New York, I go to California. I mean, all these places which are multicultural. Like
Right.
I felt more out of place in Cambridge than I did in New York. It was
Seriously?
just
Cambridge, England, as in Cambridge.
yes, because I went to Cambridge for my undergraduate, right? So Cambridge is very white and like very few. It had international students, but it didn't have that, and it had a very. I'm not going to say weren't there wasn't a multicultural population or multicultural students, but I think compared to New York, where you would just walk down the street and you can say, "Well, I'm a New Yorker," and everyone would believe you. Um, I think that was more difficult in Cambridge. I was an international student in Cambridge. I was a New Yorker in New York. I think that
I am shocked, and I'm very sorry that you had that kind of bad experience when you were over in the UK. Because I
no,
always,
it wasn't bad in the way. So let if this came out wrong, I apologize. It wasn't an experience where it was bad, where it was a bad thing, or I was discriminated against, or there was any racism. It was just that because it's not as multicultural, your self-image of yourself is an outsider. Whereas in a place like New York, where everyone's so different and it's like a melting pot of so many cultures, that you just blend in a lot more easily. But it wasn't, the people were fantastic. No one ever said anything to me. It wasn't, in no way was it discriminatory or racist in any sense of the word. It was amazing. I had great friends. But my perspective was that where, in terms of blending in, because it was so multicultural and it was more white here.
but did you ever pop down to London?
Of course, yes, we would, but obviously, being in Cambridge, we were studying too much. So,
Yeah.
I mean,
So hopefully in London you didn't feel the odd one out.
no, of course not. London, you feel like a London, yes, yes.
Yeah, London's much the same as New York, as in multicultural
Yeah.
and everything
Multicultural
goes,
city,
which is great.
yeah, of course, of course.
Ali, thank you very much for your time and sharing all your stories and your insights. I'm sure our viewers have been very impressed. In fact, I've been reading a lot of comments which says very good, well said, that you're the pride of Pakistan is also another comment that we have received. So thank you very much for your time. And
no, thank you. We had a great multicultural international discussion, which is very good.
well, I'm glad we've been able to exchange some ideas. Hopefully you'll come back again sometime. And anybody viewing this, if they are interested in either being a host or being interviewed, please do contact, there's a ticker tape going at the bottom, please do contact BPWS, and we look forward to seeing you in a week's time. Take care. Thank you very much, Ali.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.